health is physical wealth.
Hello, hello, hello. Today is January 15th, 2024. And do you know what today is? Today is Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, and a time where everybody stops and takes a remembrance for his birthday. This is a live interactive show, and I definitely need your comments. I need your comments. As I tell people in the background, don't watch me be wrong and don't say anything. Correct me. Stress is a monster in everybody's life. And in this show, Adroit Living session of the Erudition Network, I like to try to emphasize what stress is doing to everyone, because mental health is physical wealth. And then what that means is, once we realize the expense, the cost of having proper mental health, then we'll understand the value in investing in everybody having, mental well-being. We'll invest in mental health a little bit more freely and more liberally. So today's topic, I'm going to give people some time to get in here, but today's topic is Martin Luther King Jr. was a preacher first. I know a lot of people say things like, oh, well, Martin Luther King Jr., and there's some controversy and everything around it, but Martin Luther King Jr. was first a preacher. His father was a preacher. He comes from a family that was deeply rooted in the belief of God. And a lot of people want to, right away jump to black and white, black versus white, and black against white and white against black. But it was not about that for Martin Luther King Jr. And that is one of the reasons why my uncle Fred Shuttlesworth wanted to have his voice in the South helping to segregate schools. And a long time ago in the South, schools were segregated, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. helped with the efforts in making the schools less segregated. Thank you for coming, Eddie. Thank you for coming. Yes, Martin Luther King Jr. was a man of God. Yes, he was. And a lot of people try to overlook that because it seems like it's not as relevant as we would like, to believe that it was more about something else. It's more about one love. A lot of people want to twist the narrative and say different things, but the matter of the fact is we really need to emphasize that one love, especially in a time where everybody is saying things like, Black Lives Matter, Cops Lives Matter, or Blue Lives Matter, whatever. It's one love, and we all need to understand that. I recently wrote on my Facebook page, let me see if I can go back to it so I can quote it exactly. I don't like to quote things because sometimes you get quotations wrong. And heaven forbid that I should get anything wrong. People in this cancel culture, they're like, oh, you got that wrong. You were mistaken. It could be one word off. And it's like, it doesn't matter because they're going to ridicule you something terrible and try to cancel you because you got something wrong. And it's like, oh man, can't you just overlook it? Goodness. But anyway, I said something about, let me see if I can get back to it, because sometimes we say things, we look at things and we're like, oh, well, maybe it didn't matter. Maybe, I should have been more prepared, but I didn't think that I would forget. It's this whole, being online thing that I don't do the cameras. I don't do being in front of the camera like that. But anyway, so it says, what was it? God makes rules, commandments, and I don't know. Let me see. I can't remember. God makes rules and commandments, and man makes orthodox for the purpose of, I can't find it, for the purpose of control and power. So with that being said, when we see that I don't know. I really hate the camera, and I try not to, remember that it's there. But I don't know if I can get back to that Facebook post. I want to say it's there, but okay. God has rules / commandments, and man created orthodox methodology and titles which incorporates God's rules for the purpose of earthly control and earthly financial gain. There we go. There we go. It all comes to me when I'm offline. I can't do it in this camera because it's like, oh, all the pressure. But anyway, with that being said, perhaps I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong and you're a preacher and you know the Bible better than I do, or you know the orthodoxy and mythology of, behind God and everything, then please step in and correct me. But because, God makes commandments, and the one commandment that we all remember is love you one another, do unto others as you would have others to do unto you. And all of these things that, let us to understand that it's one love under one nation, under God, undivisible under God. Hey, Facebook user. Hey, stick with me, stick with me. I'm gonna get it right. I'm gonna start reading my notes. I try not to read the notes. But anyway, Martin Luther King Jr. understood that, as long as we abide by God's commandments and we put again, to the forefront that we love one another, not, worry about those things that divide us all, but we love one another and we try to treat each other as we would want anybody else to treat us. So when he was saying things like, when he was fighting for school being segregated and people, the bus boycotting and things like that, when he was fighting for those things, he was trying to show people who had the control, who had the earthly financial control over these financial gains, these earthly financial gains and methods of prosperity. He was trying to show them, hey, look, you can have that. That's not a problem. But the problem is the method in which you are using this power. And why is that important? Well, when it comes down to it, we all have this mental health problem where it's on the back burner as opposed to it being in the forefront of everyone's minds. And when God said, love you one another and do unto you others as you would have them to do unto you, he should have said something. Well, he could have said, well, it's about your mental health. And if you mess up that, everything's going to be messed up. And it's like, we as people, I remember there was a time when Jesus had tarried with a group of fishermen, and they was like, well, you keep using these proverbs and stuff that we don't understand. We don't understand it. And he was like, I'm using the proverbs to help to relate this message in a method in which you can understand it. And for whatever reason, they still weren't able to understand what he was saying. But when Martin Luther King Jr. came around, it was like, look, we know why you can't understand. It's about your education. You can't understand because your level of education isn't what it should be. The formal language and the formal education is conditioning your mind to forget about the formal logic of these messages. So it was like, okay, how do we get there? It's because man made this orthodox methodology, and everybody had to stay in the framework of that ideology. And because of that, it started to mess people's minds up. It started to mess up the method in which people conducted business. And that's why it's like, okay, we're really borderline what God's commandments were. We're really, on the fence with that. We lukewarm with it because we're trying to, create the orthodox titles in alignment with God's rules. But sometimes we get a little out of control because we fail to understand the importance of it. And a lot of people don't understand it because there's a financial gain to it that escapes people's understanding. So let me, 10 years after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. died, there were some studies done by two people called, I'm probably going to get the names wrong, but Bear and Newman. Was it Newman? Um, it was a occupational stress study that was performed. And I told you in previous episodes that sometimes, you know, people don't like to. Eddie, is it right? Is it Bear and Newman? Um, People don't want to acknowledge certain research already exists. There were centuries before. There were some German psychologists um, who already stated, they already conducted studies who, thank you, I appreciate it. And make sure you guys comment. This is an interactive live stream, so please make sure you comment. Um, so these centuries old studies that stated that these problems exist and were connected with um, was connected, the stress was connected to humans' psyche, or the way they think, behave, and act, the way they feel, and the way that they perceive information. You know how sometimes you'll say something to somebody and they get it twisted, and you're like, man, how did you come up with that when all I said was, I appreciate you coming, or I appreciate you seeing, or hello. And they all, off on a tangent, something. And you're like, man, how do we get here? Because centuries old German philosophers already said the things that stress can cause. A lot of people don't understand that mental health impacts um, not just the person, the individual, but it affects their jobs, their faith, the places that they're in faith, schools, and just the general public. It's not even safe for you to be in the general public, because now the stress has kicked over to make you behave in such a way that it's like, man, now people are acting out in their jobs, they're acting out in places of faith, they're acting out in schools, and in general locations like the mall, the theaters, all kinds of things. And it's like, you didn't know where it came from. And that's because the general studies that were conducted centuries ago, and even 10 years after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. died in 1978, Burke and Newman wrote a study that emphasized occupational stress. Now, if you think about it, slavery, a lot of people are saying it was a form of work. It was a workforce. And yes, for African American employment, they were slaves. It wasn't a matter of them having financial compensation, but they had housing and things like that, and they were forced to be there. So as what? As a workforce. So because of that, they were able to have them insured as property and insured as a workforce. That's what the insurance insured them for. And after slavery was over, there was still this occupational method of stress, because the system continued to condition this occupational stressful hazard. And Burke and Newman had stated that this occupational stress does a number of things. I'm going to read these notes so you can see. It messes with, it causes anxiety, tension, depression. You think sometimes you don't know where your depression is coming from. It's stress. It's stress. You think you don't know where your anxiety is coming from, and you're like, man, I feel tense, but you don't know where the tension is coming from, or why you feel so tense, why you feeling so anxious. It's because of these things, the stress that's being caused. Now, yeah, I don't think that 10 years after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. died, nobody's really in slavery, but it's still that same systemic withholding and withholding promotions, information, all sorts of things that's causing you stress, and you don't know where it's coming from. Centuries old studies said it, and in 1978, studies continue to go on that stated, yeah, it's dissatisfaction is also derived from there, that stress. And it's like, you ever feel like you can't be content? It's like, oh, I just can't find contentment no matter what I do. Yeah, stress, and you don't know where it's coming from. And then it's like boredom and semantic complications, complications within your body. And then there's this physiological fatigue, psychological fatigue, and feelings of futility, meaning you don't feel like you're worth doing anything. You don't feel like, that you can do anything of value. And a lot of people, they have this feeling of imposter syndrome because they don't feel like they can do anything that's worth any value. But the fact is, you're so significant and so individual and unique that your individual contribution in the way you encode information, meaning you take in information, process it, and then you use it and apply it in the method that you do. It's also unique that there is never going to be anybody that can do exactly what you do. So you can never be replaced. What you say, Eddie? Enslaved workforce had both the stress of oppression and the stress of traditional work stress we feel today. Yes. And a lot of people don't even see it because they don't necessarily make the correlation. But there's a causation and correlation for work stress and the system, the broken system that we keep on perpetuating. And we're like, well, it's broken, but, it's familiar. It doesn't matter. It's a problem because of these things that's associated with the stress. And what you say, Facebook user, stress passes down through genetics. You know what? We're going to get there. We're going to get there because you bring up a really valid point. Agreed. It could also cause depression, frustration. Yes, studies show that this is some things that it causes. It causes inadequacy, feelings of inadequacy, feelings of low self-esteem. It causes cardiovascular problems. Now, you on your job, and sometimes, I don't know, some people, you have a job where the job insures you. It gives life insurance for you. Why you think they give a life insurance policy? Some people don't even know that that's the thing. But yes, they have a life insurance policy on you. Why you think that is? Okay, it causes gastro disorders, how everybody's talking about, like, it's real big, where everybody's saying, what is it, irritable bowel syndrome? Why is that trending? Can you imagine? And then it's like dispensary visits, meaning drug abuse, including alcohol, caffeine, and nicotine. Now, we've tried to change from nicotine and use vaping. It's still a problem. The problem is the abuse of these things because we're trying to fulfill voids or feel a hurt or, control our stress. The stress is coming from something else that you need to be aware of, and we need to fix it. It's 2024. Centuries-old studies came up with these understandings, and you mean we're still struggling with it in 2024? Why is that? Because it's not enough people talking about these things, such as mental health is physical wealth, and making the causation and correlation. The correlation is that if you are like financially gaining from people who are working for you, and there's the workforce. Occupational stress is a problem because it was written a long time ago. Even if we didn't want to, make the relation leak into slavery, but we learned a lot of things from observing the workforce of the slave master, the slave owners, the slaves themselves. We learned a lot, and we learned a lot from Martin Luther King Jr. coming in and saying, look, because he was a black man and he was a descendant of slaves. And he said, look, forget all the hate, forget all the anger, forget all of the distress of all of the things that those situations cause, and let's start anew. Let's begin anew. How? With one love. Loving everybody. Just unite. Why? Because that was the word of God. And he was a preacher first. Before anything, he was a preacher. So he also understood that, and so did centuries-old studies that stated the feelings derived from stress. Okay, the feelings of alienation, psychosis, anger. A lot of people try to say, well, people in the Black community, they angry all the time. They always angry. It's not a particular cultural thing. It's an occupational stress, because these occupational stresses, they carry over into your life. A lot of people want to say there's studies that's out here, and they say things, and that's what I mean by a lot of people. They want to try to say that you should be able to have a divide between your work-life balance, and it's just not there, because studies, centuries old studies and emerging studies are showing that there's a bleed over. There's a bleed over from you having stress that's at your job, and then you coming and carrying that same stress over to where you are at home, where you go to school, where you go to practice your faith in God, or your disfaith, or whatever. It's still carrying over. And you think people don't know. You think there's studies that don't show it. Yes, there are studies that show it, but we're not talking about it in just the regular everyday life. And that's why these live streams are important, because we do need to get the word out there. And even though I'm not, really well versed in being in front of the camera, I know a lot of people who are, and they watch this show and then they go and talk about it. So let's get back to the feelings, the other feelings that it brings on. It brings on the feeling of oppression, suppression, or feelings and ideas of suppression and oppression. It brings on loss of concentration. Imagine that. You can't concentrate. Yeah, you can't concentrate because you're stressed. There's no further distraction than being stressed. Entertainment is not as much of a distractor. Love isn't as much a distractor than stress. Stress is a very potent factor of being distracted and loss of concentration. It even causes respiratory problems. Now, we're seeing during the pandemic, a lot of people are having respiratory problems, but we have also seen in that people are forced, they're compelled to go to work to avoid poverty, but at the same time, they're forced to go to work, and it's a whole pandemic. People were dying, they're dropping dead, and nobody really understood why and what this illness called COVID-19 is really about. And it was causing a great deal of stress, overwhelming stress. But then there was the essential workers who had to be out there, and they had no other choice but to stay out there and put themselves in jeopardy of losing their life. That was stressful. That was an occupational stress that was resulting from the need to not, fall into poverty. Because regardless, you still had to pay your mortgage. You still had to pay your rent. And it was like, oh, well, there's loopholes. There's these government programs where you don't have to pay your mortgage. That's a lie, because the mortgage companies were saying, well, yeah, you can file for, some sort of program where you don't have to pay your mortgage. But when that time frame was over, they expect, and they fully expect, for you to have all of your financial affairs in order and be up to date with your mortgage. We didn't expect that the COVID-19 virus or quarantine was going to last as long as it did, but it did. And it not only affected corporations in the manner in which we saw, like oil barons, they were like, where nobody's getting oil, and we invested in this in a significant amount. We're not seeing any return on our investment because no one is purchasing gasoline, petrol, oil. That's because nobody could leave their house because they were afraid. The stress from that kept them bound to their homes because they did not want to put their lives in jeopardy in the manner in which they purposely, went out there knowing there's something out there, causing people to fall ill unto death. So the stress from like, oh man, we've been in it too long. I can't pay my bills. I can't afford my kids' health care. And that was an issue too, because if you don't have money to pay your mortgage, you definitely don't have money to pay for insurance. And we saw with like the various weather disasters, a lot of people who were hit by those natural disasters, they said they could not even afford their insurance. So when they had that disaster to hit, they were even more stressed because they didn't have insurance to pay for anything, and they didn't have insurance because they weren't going to work. And the government isn't just going to give you real money. They give you a little bit to suffice you over for a little bit, but they didn't give you real money. You're not getting six-figure pay that week for, missing work. This isn't jury duty. I think it was even less than they gave you for jury duty. The point of the matter is, it was the stress, and that stress causing a loss of concentration, and it can also cause cancer. I said that before, but these studies in 1979, which was 10 years after Dr. Martin Luther King had died, it showed that yes, stress can cause cancer. It can cause all kinds of bodily injuries, bodily dysfunctions, skin disorders. You have eczema. You have these just rashes that come out of nowhere. You're like, man, what is wrong with me? Let me tell you, stress does all of these things, and studies way before you were born were out there saying, hey, look, and then studies after the fact. In 1978, we're still emerging, stating these very same things about physical and psychological fatigue or strain. It can cause eating disorders. It causes for you to. It causes nervous tics, pacing, risky behavior like reckless driving. I know a lot of people who say things like you shouldn't drive and drink. You shouldn't drink and drive because it could cause people to be harmed that you wouldn't normally harm, because you're not making proper decisions. You're not being reasonable in your decision-making process. And vehicles are a deadly weapon, or can be viewed as a deadly weapon if it hits someone and causes them bodily harm or ends their life. So stress also causes people it increases gambling, aggression, vandalism, and stealing. And we saw during the pandemic that people were vandalizing. And you're like, man, these people don't normally behave this way. We saw with the January 6th in the Capitol how people stormed the Capitol. You're like, where did this come from? What is going on? It's stress, and the stress that the workforce, the industrial organization did not really put much value into. And the government, when everything had to shut down, they didn't put very much value into it because they just didn't make the correlation and causation. It wasn't there for them. They didn't make the link between it because we're not talking about it. These studies are out there for everybody to see. It also has it causes poor interpersonal relationships, like relationships with your friends, family, co-workers. You ever had a co-worker that was just like, ugh? And some people had a co-worker that was really nice. And somewhere along the lines, that person that was nice just snapped out of nowhere. Nobody really even noticed. There was in the news where was this one guy nobody knew was being bullied at the workplace. And then one day he just snapped. He couldn't take it no more, and he just started shooting. And everybody was like, man, I thought he was a quiet person. I thought he was a nice guy, because stress. And it's like we don't place enough emphasis on it because nobody wants to be held accountable for these things. But we need to start holding people accountable. It's 2024. We need to figure it out. Because as intelligent as we are, the Bible says that the young are wiser, younger in the last days. And I'm sure we can figure it's the last days, considering all the hell we're going through with the natural disasters, with the people of not being able to avoid falling into poverty, not being able to control falling into poverty, not being able to control their education. Even though you pay for a good education, did you know that you still won't have that education? And especially in online institutions, because no one really knows who has what books. I'm going to get into it. Buy my book. But anyway, it's still a method of perpetuating a known broken system where we saw segregation caused occupational stress, and we couldn't say that, but we could say it in the way that Burke and Newman had phrased it. I think that's the right. I keep forgetting their names. I'm terrible with names. If you haven't noticed, I'm terrible with names. I need my notes. What you say, Dr. King's lost battle was against poverty. He believed that Americans should have a living wage that provided for basic living for everyone. Yes. And because we didn't have that, because we didn't have the same education, uh, yeah, his last battle, not the lost battle, his last battle. I'm sorry. Because we didn't have that from what he had in his last battle, um, it did cause and perpetuate the new generations that experience the occupational stress. It caused them these very well-known problems, and it also caused in financials. It caused changes in profits, and you have to imagine it's going to cause problems with the last battle. Thank you for correcting me. Um, you have to imagine that the stress will cause losses with um, changes with profits, meaning, sometimes I spoke about it in some previous episodes where I stated, um, the perspectives, the business perspectives in a business plan is the financial aspects that's going to project what monies you believe you should profit or gain from experience, a job experience. So if you're an entrepreneur and you have a business plan, you have this expectation of how much money are you going to generate having opened your business. A lot of people, they understand that to be a business performer. So it's telling you, well, you can gain this much money by opening this company over here or over there or wherever is a good location for you to be able to prosper according to what your product is that you're selling. Well, guess what? In the pandemic, we saw people are not prospering in the manner that they believe they would, because there's changes in the profits. There's changes in the sales. Like I said with the oil barons, for a good example, because the oil barons believe, they knew everybody needs gasoline, and they need to hurry up and get as much money out of people before we all go green. So it was that part. And then there was changes in earnings. So yeah, your basic living, your cost of living has increased so much. I was like, when I was looking at it, previously, I was like, well, I know it was really geared towards, the price hikes and in cost of living, and, well, affordable deodorants, soaps, and things like that, and housing. It reached everything, clothes, everything. And it was like, I figured once it got to a certain level where it's not just negatively impacting the targeted audience like minorities and people who are targeted so that they can remain in the, below the average income that will keep them out of the line of poverty. I figured, okay, well then, the cost of living will be more reasonable. That didn't happen. People went off grid, and they was like, well, forget it. We're just going to live off grid. We're going to live off the land. And I'm like, they're going to live in their vans. They're going to live in their cars. They're just going to avoid, um, being impacted by it at all. And I'm like, man, that's not helping. And that's not just that it's not helping, but it's causing more stress, because now you don't even have a roof over your head where you feel comfortable that somebody's not going to break into where you are while you're sleeping and take advantage of you. Like, take all of your stuff, run away with all your stuff, kick you out of it, and run away with your whole house, because you're living in your van, you're living in your car, you're living in a trailer park, on wheels. And it's like, and you driving it around, it's not like the ones that are stable, but the ones that you're, just mobile in because you're traveling from here to there as the weather allows so that you can, have warmth while you're sleeping in your vehicles. It was like, I thought that that would, be the catalyst that makes the economy be more reasonable, but it did not. It just got even more absurd. And people are not making the link to say these are causing stresses. Now, what's the other cost? Change in ability to recruit and retain quality employees. Quality employees, you would imagine that it'd be easy to get somebody that's qualified for a job or a position. No, it has been the manner that I have seen for myself where, for example, my name is Tina Phillips, right? I applied for some executive positions in the industrial organization, and I didn't get a call back after passing all the tests. I knew I passed all the tests, and I called the organization, and I spoke with an executive manager. And he said, "Oh, you Tina Phillips? Oh, yeah, I saw you. Yeah, you did really great on your test, your assessments and your personality assessment and your academic assessments. And I saw your resume. You're well overqualified, but you're going to get the job. You got it. It's easy as nothing." And then it was this question: "Can you send me a profile?" I said, "A profile?" He said, "Yeah, a profile picture. So we'll know, who you are when you come in for the interview and everything. But you got the job. It's all said and done. Your name is Tina Phillips. Yes, of course, you got the job." Now, Tina Phillips is a very common name where you can identify my ethnicity just by saying Tina Phillips. And it's like, okay, that's going to be a thing. Guess what? Never heard back from them again. I knew what it was about. And then there was other executive positions I put in for, and they were like, "Oh, it was a computer position." I'll just say it that way. And it was a managerial position overseeing people who were more qualified than I was, but I was encouraged to apply, and I did. And during the phone interview process, they were like, "Well, you don't have to know anything about computers. All you have to do is monitor those people who are working on the computers." These people had certifications, education, degrees, and all kinds of things. And then when they found out, yet again, when they found out I was African American, suddenly, "Oh no, we found someone else." Yeah, but I still got the understanding of what you were about when you said I don't even have to know anything about computers. So you would imagine that you could find people who are qualified for jobs, but when the gatekeepers are only gatekeeping to oppress, suppress, and to keep particular people underfoot, that's why you have occupational stress. That's why you have occupational injuries. That's why you have changes in profits, changes in sales, changes in earnings. And it all leads to changes in the ability to obtain raw materials. That's from the studies, and I'm reading my notes. And it increases or decreases in control over environmental changes, innovation, and creativity. And let me tell you, a lot of people try to predict what the economy is going to be. For example, some years ago, they predicted that the Asian community was going to be the most in population, the highest population of Earth people or whatever. The highest population of people in the Earth were going to be Asians. And then the pandemic hit. I didn't believe. I don't. They even have a doomsday clock. I don't believe in any of that. But I watch because it's intriguing and it's entertaining to me. But then the pandemic hit, and they said that it first hit where? In Asia. So their population was negatively impacted first and drastically. And then it spread everywhere else. But it's like we can't control these environmental changes, so we can't predict it. We don't know what's going to happen. And the reason why they want to know what happens is because they want to know how to invest. They want to know how to move, what to do, and how to do it. And let me tell you something. Let me finish the notes first. It also causes changes in a quality of work life, the increase and decrease in employment strikes. We've seen that with the actors and actresses and the Writers Guild. We saw that. I did shows about it. We've definitely seen it. If you watch my shows, you've definitely seen me talk about it. And it also causes changes in influence of supervisors and grievances. Now I wrote about that, and I'm going to tell you more about it. But we know, we already know executive administrations, the government, and the gatekeepers. We already know. Everybody knows. It's not just the lay people that know about these issues. And Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. talked about it, you know, in his life, and we're recognizing this day so that we can remember, what did he talk about, what was his point. It's not just about black and white, or black against white, or white against black, and black. It's not about that. It's about the need for us to avoid these problems, and these are the reasons why. These are the cost behind the stresses of these things that we are dealing with. It's not just occupational stress, because it carries over, it bleeds over into your everyday life. And if it's bleeding over into your everyday life, that means every aspect of your life. You think that erectile dysfunction is not is not impacted by it. You think that your libido is not impacted by it. You think that your hair falling out, or there's correlation and causation. What does that mean? That means that the stress that you're enduring, the stress that you are trying to cope with, it has causes. It has effects to, like, your everything. Now, I'm not gonna go over all the things, but it's your money, first and foremost, because you're trying to stay out of poverty. It's your love life, whether that love life is between your mate or your children. That's your love. That's your heart. Or and your religion, your faith in God. Because a lot of people are like, man, why would God allow these things to happen? Because God made commandments. Man made, man created orthodox methodologies and titles which incorporates God's commandments. But they got so far away from, they strayed so far away from it. It was like, man, what are we doing? It's like we're forgetting altogether about God's commandments. We become so lukewarm that we don't think love should be for everybody. We think love should be only for particular people, as long as we can get along with most of their decisions in their life. And that's not true. You think Martin Luther King Jr. agreed with everybody who marched with him? They were marching for a particular purpose, and that was for the opportunity and the ability to create a space where we can all be safe in school. And what is school directly related to? Occupations. School is the only place, school and church, well, not church, but your faith. Those are the only two establishments that touch everything all over the world. Think about that. Think about how significant that is. School and faith places. That is what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was fighting about. That's what he was marching for. And he was peaceful in his fight. He was peaceful in his march. He was loving in his march, because he understood, as a preacher first, with love and kindness have I drawn thee. And we ventured so far away from love. We ventured so far away from kindness that it's like, I don't have to be nice to you. I don't have to be nice to you. Even if I love you, I don't have to be nice to you. Really? People have said that. I know you've heard them say that, I love you, but I don't have to be nice to you. And we look at it like, oh, well, how are these things affecting me? And this is how I showed you how it's affecting you. It's affecting you in such a way that you may not have realized. The centuries-old studies already predicted how you were going to be negatively impacted by it, both physically, emotionally, and financially. You didn't know that, but now you do. Now share this episode with people because other people need to know. I'm going to try to write down the name of the study in the comments later so that you will see who it is so you can go and find that study. But German philosophers like Husserl, German philosophers that came that studied under him and branched off into their own. And I'm terrible with names, so you're gonna have to keep watching because I didn't write all those notes down because I just wanted to point out, that these victimless crimes don't consider mental damage, emotional developments of stressful triggers leading to random outbursts and unsafe moments during times people should feel safe. They're not considering that. They call it a victimless crime. It's no such thing as a victimless crime, considering that it's developing these triggers. The stress from these victimless crimes are developing triggers, and these triggers it's like a landmine. And somebody can accidentally step on them, and you're in the mall, and somebody's being triggered. And now they snapping off and they doing things and it's like, oh my God, I'm supposed to feel safe here. It's people in schools that have been triggered. And that means that now they going and they snapping off. And it's like, oh no, I'm supposed to feel safe here. This is the thing about feeling safe. The only thing that can control what's happening and what's going to happen to you is your prayers. You're just gonna have to pray because we saw how Dr. Martin Luther King started his marches. We saw how he started and continued his marches and his fight. He always prayed before, during, and after. Why? Why was that significant? Look how effective it was. How about that? Look at the financial changes, the positive financial increases that such a fight as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s caused or led to. You want to look at it as, well, it didn't make a difference because look where we are now. We are where we are now because nobody's talking about these kind of studies. Nobody's saying how these things impact us and why it's financially beneficial for people who financial, giants who are like, well, no, I'm gonna hold on to my money. I'm gonna die with my money, and ain't nobody gonna get my money. This is why. This is why we can't control the economy. This is why we can't predict what's going to happen because we are stressing people beyond their limits. The psychological impact is just so profound. It's like everything's so random. People are so random. The psychological effects impact people and their relationships with their families. And it's like, I know a lot of people know about coats. And you see how people are so drawn to coats. And it's like, wow, how is it possible that you are so drawn to a coat when it's like, everybody knows that's not good for you. Look at it this way. It's filling a lot of the problems of their stress. It's addressing a lot of their stressors. And when you have people who are more aware of their stressors and their stressors are not being taken care of, they're going to lean to things that's going to fill those voids. That's one of the things we call making risky decisions. It's like what's going to happen, but you're doing it anyway. You're doing it anyway. Why? Because the stress. And it's like you don't know what to do, and you're trying to control how you hurt. You're trying to control how you are stressed. You think people don't know? It's studies that were done way before you were born. Way before you were born. But what's the answer? There we go. Now we're getting into the real question. What is the answer to these problems? The answer is you have to start acknowledging these things. You have to say it in a unified voice. 2024 is that time when we say no more. No more of that BS. No more of knowing that the system is broken and still perpetuating it. No more of knowing that these stressors are causing us mental problems, um, uh, somatic problems, problems within your body, ailments, arthritis. It's causing arthritis. It's causing cancer. Now, how many of you have said, given the middle finger to cancer? How many people have said, they hate cancer? How many people have? Where is it coming from? Where's it coming from? So, are you saying no to cancer, or are you saying no to what's causing arthritis, what's causing cancer, what's causing depression, what's causing your medical problems that you can avoid if you were to figure this stress thing out? And where's the stress coming from? Because we don't have no love, because the systems that we're perpetuating is keeping us bound and conditioned to perpetuate this level of stress and randomness of trigger. Oh, I was triggered, so I just snapped off. Only certain people are going to be excused, even though it's a valid point. It's a valid causation that you snapped off, and now, because you were triggered from your stressors, you're going to have to suffer those consequences on your own. There's a lot of people in the January 6th that suffering consequences because, yeah, they were stressed. They were stressed because it was perpetuated that the minorities and African Americans are going to replace you. They're going to replace your job. They're going to replace you in managerial positions. They're going to replace you. And that was perpetuated so much. They stressed people out so much that the January 6th happened. Yes, there were other reasons why, and it was, but it was mainly because the stress from being given misinformation that helped the government and those in control, gatekeepers, to control earthly finances, have earthly control over all of these things that help people to say, "Look, I'm over you. I can do whatever I want to you." That's not going to keep going the way that it was before the digital technology, the digital world, the digital age, the digital era. It's not going to keep going that way. I know you've all seen how some people, every time somebody says something, they got a recording that says, well, no, actually what you said was, well, that's called a lie. That's called a inaccuracy, or whatever way they want to twist the narrative. For example, remember back when OJ was being prosecuted, there was some tapes, some recordings that took place that nobody really talked about. But some woman had the idea to record one of the leaders and gatekeepers that would later be accountable for saying that OJ was or was not, or should not be convicted of a crime that he may or may not have committed. And the man who stood on the stand to say, he was actually, he had a lot of hate in him, and it's hate for gender, and hatred for culture, and hatred for just losing control of the ability to manipulate other people's ability to progress or prosper. Uh, so and so yeah, the recordings, however, the woman didn't release it. What did you say? A lousy cop that had access to, yeah. And in the recording, no, on the stand, the man was asked, and he was a white man, and he said, and the judge asked the white cop, who was racist and sexist, and it was the recordings did identify that was the case. So I'm not making assumptions or jumping to conclusions. You have to watch that documentary for yourself. But the guy said, the judge asked him, did you, no, not the judge, but the lawyer asked him, did you hide or manipulate evidence? And the cop said, I'm gonna plead the fifth right now. I'm not gonna say nothing. But everybody knew that cop is still testifying in a manner which controls certain people's ability to progress, to prosper, or even to stay out of jail. These problems are derived from a lot of hate, a lot of misinformation, and the lack of love, the lack of kindness. Now, the young lady who had the tapes and who recorded this information, she didn't record because she was trying to keep OJ safe or had any correlation with OJ. It had nothing to do with OJ. It was the matter of the fact that she was studying for something else. I understand, I get it. I was studying for something else and I wrote some things down, and in the progress of that endeavor, I discovered some other things. And in those recordings that I have, I wasn't recording because I was trying to catch somebody else up. I was recording for study purposes. Just like this woman, she was recording for something else, and just so happened that it was good for what she, for somebody else. He was declared racist and sexist. He stated groups called White Anglo-Saxons Police, WASP, and Men Against Women, MAW. Yeah, this man was, I think it said the dragon leader, whatever the head leader, the dragon, meaning the head leader of the organizations. The matter of the fact is, Martin Luther King Jr. marched for us to understand that we need to love. And when you have all this stress, the only thing that can win, now here's the answer. Here's the answer. The only thing that can win is love, kindness, and fighting for what's right. And stop perpetuating these things that's wrong, because in this digital age, you're going to get caught. You're going to get caught in everything that you did, regardless of what name you did it in. It's all going to come back on you. Shake down, press together, 100-fold, and running over. Because these recordings, you've been recorded. What did you say? They had a leader called the Grand Dragon, the same as the KKK. No one knew this information until recently. It is too often hidden. It is. And I understand, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't really emphasize the darker side of things more than he perpetuated love, the idea of unifying, the idea of being kind to one another, because he was a preacher first. He was a preacher first. And it's not loving to oppress. It's not loving to put people in a state of depression. It's not loving or kind to stress people, knowing that this is what it's going to do to them, knowing that it's going to mess with them mentally, physically, and financially, knowing that it's going to hinder their ability to live a prosperous life. The forefathers already came together and said, look, this is what we got to do. All men are created equally, and we all have the pursuit of happiness that we are capable of pursuing, and we should not be hindered in doing so. But people have made their own decision, and that decision was not done in love. So what's the answer? No more in 2024. We're going to move past it. We're going to share these recordings. And if it harms you, it was you. It's recording. Your voice, your face is you. I'm telling my story. Like that woman told her story. We all telling our own stories. And if it harms you because you intended harm, guess what? You're getting exactly what you deserve. I used to feel like I don't want that to happen to anybody, but I didn't cause it. So it is what it is. So that's my show for today. Remember, you can rewind this show. You can binge watch all the other episodes. I give little bits of information in all the episodes that help support mental health. And I want you to make sure that you share these episodes, especially this one, so more people have a clear understanding of the cost and the problem as well as the solution. That's my show for today. Remember, mental health is physical wealth.
Mental health is physical